Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Today the house is a little bit empty, but I'm hoping a lot of people come. I'm just a little bit late today. I'm pretty sure it's in the spiritual side. It's busy. There's a lot of people here. Welcome everyone that are with us over the internet. It's always good to have you back here with us. Today we are going to be talking about the work and leisure, right? Two things that we like to do. I hope both of them. But as always, before we do that, we're going to do our initial reading and our initial prayer. So today I'm going to be reading by the book Happy Life, by Divaldo Pereira Franco, by the Spirit of Joana de Angelis. The opportunities of moral improvement that life allows us should be taken advantage of wisely and immediately. The march of time is inevitable, and on occasion neglected is lost forever. Time and wind never come back. Thus, it is liberating blessing to utilize every opportunity for inner growth. Stay alert in order to take the most advantage of the hours of your entirely earthly existence. And let us all now connect our thoughts and our hearts with God, our Creator, with the Jesus, our guiding light, and the good spirits here present at His rest today. And may the spirits here guide all of us through this lecture today, so we all can learn a little bit and absorb a little bit more from the divine laws. And so be it. All right. So you guys have an overdose of me today, because I'm pretty much doing everything. So, because Leo came late, because otherwise we'd be reading. Didn't purpose, Leo, because I put him on the spot last week, right? Yeah. All right, so today we're going to be talking about work and leisure, or as the Spirits call it in the Spirits book, labor and rest. Okay. So the Spirits book is divided in 4 parts, and part 3 is actually all the divine laws. So there's many chapters under the chapter, part 4, and it's all the divine laws. And we have been going through some of them already, right, in the last couple of months. So in May, we brought the law of destruction, Joe brought the law of society, then in June, Raphael brought the law of progress. And then in July, a couple of weeks ago, Marco brought a very important lecture, which is the law of justice, love, and charity, which I invite all of us to kind of watch again. Go to our YouTube and just watch again, because you really this law of justice, love, and charity really summarize all the other laws, right? So it's very important. I remember when I was here watching his lectures, like, oh, that's very connected with the lecture that I have to do in 2 weeks with the law of labor, right? But the law of labor to me is also very important and kind of summarize all the other ones, because when we think about the law of justice, love, and charity, that's kind of the pathway. This is the pathway that we have to go. But it's through labor that we get to that pathway. It's through labor that we're going to get there, right? So it's through labor that we're going to achieve that pathway. So I think they all go hand in hand, but I think those 2 laws, the law of labor and the law of justice, love, and charity, kind of combine, kind of guide all the other laws around it, right? But today we're just going to, the chapter is called the law. So chapter 3, it's called the law of labor. But the chapter does not talk just about labor. It talks about rest as well, right? So we're going to be talking about both of them, because they kind of have hand in hand. If you're talking about labor, you have to talk about rest. And it's fun because it's very easy. Even if you go to the internet, try to find any spiritist lecture about the law of labor, you find many of them. We don't talk much about rest, right? It's almost like, oh, I should not rest, I should always work. And it's true, and it's not, actually. We're going to see this. It has to have a balance, right? But what kind of work and leisure, or what kind of labor and rest we're talking about, or the spirits are talking about, right? Are they talking about the physical labor or the material labor, or they're talking about the spiritual labor? Which one they're talking about? And which one is more important, right? They're talking about both. They're both important. And it's very important for us to find a balance between both of them. So the physical labor that we do and the spiritual labor that we do, they're equally important. We one a little bit more than the other, but because you're incarnated, they are both important. And they go hand in hand, they help each other. Same thing in the rest. The physical rest and the spiritual rest, they're both important. And we're going to be talking about this today, right? We're going to talk about both and see how they are very important. But let's talk about labor first, because that's how the chapter starts. So Kardec starts to talk about labor. So he asks, one of the very first question, this is basically why do we need to labor? Right? Why God makes us labor? Right? Maybe it's like, couldn't he create us like ready to go? I know, no, it has to make us to work, right? Yeah, 9 to 5, and you have to work. Why? And he says, because you have to develop both your potentials, intellectual and moral. And that's you can do that through labor. That's why I have to labor, to develop, right? Because that's the truth. If back in there when in the cave, we hadn't developed any intellectual, like we hadn't really started to think and saying, how can I make my life a little bit easier? How can I warm up myself? How can I protect me from the rain? How can I hunt a little bit easier? So, I hunt more than I be hunted, right? So all of this start to make us to grow intellectually. And to go from the caveman to now have all the technology that we have today, right? And we're going to see that helps us actually to grow morally, right? So today we're more rational people because we develop intellectually, right? And that's very important, right? And that's why Kardec asks on question of 675. Should we understand labor to entail only material occupations? So labor is because that's until that's what we're going to talk about work. We're talking about the work, the one that we go, that we get paid, that a job, that's what we're thinking about work. And they say no. The spiritual labor, as much as the body, every useful occupation is labor. So everything that we do in life is labor. So labor is not just cleaning the house or going to my work that I have in my job. Labor is anything. Raising my kids, it's that I don't have me very clear. But raising our kids, that's labor. That's labor. And yeah, when they're babies, it's physical labor, but they grow up and it stops being a physical labor, but becomes now an intellectual labor, right? An education, you're educating and creating the moral basis of new human beings now, reincarnated beings that's there, that also just as us in the path of perfection, right? So that's labor, right? Just listen to a friend who's just need to vent. That's labor. That's spiritual labor. Working on inner transformation, to learn to be a little bit more patient, to learn for the forgiveness, to learn to be a little more resilient. That's work. That's spiritual work. So anything that's useful that we do in our daily lives, that's work. Because isn't that what we're here for? To work on ourselves, to better ourselves? Because the body, the physical, it is important, it's extremely important. We need to survive, we incarnated. This body here needs food, needs shelter, needs clothing. So yes, our physical bodies, the physical jobs that we do, it's very important. We're going to survive. And if you don't survive, how can I improve my spiritual? Because then I lose my opportunity of being here. I lose my opportunity, if I'm not alive here, with this body, I cannot go through the process of better my spirit. So yeah, the labor and work that we do is as important, right? That's why one of the laws under this part 4 is the law of preservation, right? It's a law, it's a divine law of preservation. We have to preserve this body. We have a moral obligation to preserve our lives. So it's important for us to work, it's important to pay the bills. Do we like? No, we do not like to pay bills. But we have to, right? It's important. It's part of living in society. It's part of preserving ourselves as human beings, preserves us as a society, right? But it's the spiritual as well. And one helps the other, right? And a easy way to understand how the intellectual growth help us to grow morally is when you think about spiritism. when the spirits decide to say, now the knowledge is coming, when the promised console is coming, 1850s, right? That's when Kardec starts to do, all these studies. Right? Which era we're in right in that time? When the era of Illuminism, which is also called the era of Enlightenment, and also is called the era of Rational. Coincidence? Not at all. Because for centuries, actually for millennia, religion and all the teachings that Jesus had brought to us, and even the teachings before from the prophets, before Christ, were being used for manipulation, for being abused as way of controlling. We control people by fear because we talked about this God who was very revengeful and mad, right? And so first we're talking about a God that was pure love, and this is our Father, but then at the same time we painted him as being this really revengeful, angry man that would punish you for eternity, right? So, and we didn't think about it before, and we led to be led by fear, right? Then it starts to come, science starts to grow, and then we go through the era of enlightenment, the Illuminism, and then rational starts to get way more important. It's like, it makes no sense. So now more and more we need science to prove. This is no scientific proof. What you're saying doesn't make any sense, right? We start to get more rational. And the moment you start to be more rational, that's the moment Spiritism comes. That's the moment saying now society is ready to receive all the knowledge that spirits are bringing. So Kardec's prepared, reincarnate, and come to bring all this amazing knowledge. Because now, and you see over time, in the last 200 years, 150 years, more like the last 150 years, more and more people are disconnecting from religions, right? More and more because it makes no sense anymore. If you don't need something that my rational says, yeah, that makes sense, people want to walk away. Because now we have access to information, right? So more and more, especially in the last 40 to 50 years that we have so much access to information, we cannot be led by fear anymore. Right? Now it has to make sense. You cannot tell me that God is pure love and tell me that he's revengeful and angry and he's going to punish me forever. That makes no sense, right? So then comes the Spirit saying there's no punishment forever, right? But it is an opportunity of re-education, an opportunity of learning again. But first, to understand what Kardec brought to us, we had to develop our intellectual. If we hadn't developed our intellectual or rational side, those books would be burned. We're never going to read them, or read them like this makes no sense, and would be still being afraid of God, which should never be afraid of God. Right? We should respect him, but never be afraid of, right? Because it's on our side. And we develop intellectual. But how we develop intellectual? By labor, right? That's how we develop. That's how we develop science, right? And it's interesting because at the time of the Illuminism, that's exactly when science became this opposite of God, right? Like there's no God and everything. But it's almost like it had to go from an extreme to the other to really break those ties. And then eventually now science more and more proves the existence of God, right? So many scientists that are now proving that and working on it, right? There's many scientific approaches now to try to prove the existence of the soul. So like it will be more and more, but we had to kind of break those ties. They were so strong to then slowly now put them back together, but in a proper way, right? In a rational way. So that's why labor is so important, because it helps us to develop our intellectual potential. So it helps to preserve ourselves, but it helps to also develop the intellectual, which consequently help us to grow morally, to be open, to be more rational, right? Imagine someone 500 years ago, there in the square, someone's going to be hanged, right? And then someone has look at, excuse me, can we talk about human rights here? Because of equality, a fair judgment here, right? They say, oh, you're next. Yeah, go out. You're next. Okay. But these days we can, right? Because as we grow morally, as we grow intellectually and start to be more rational, right? We start to say, wait a second, this is not right. This makes no sense. Why treating people, right? If we hadn't grown intellectually over 200 years ago, we wouldn't start ending slavery. until someone said, wait a second, this is wrong. Those human beings, as much as I am, this has to end. So the only reason today now we're openly talking about human rights, just because today we're talking about races, inequality, discrimination, is because over 200 years ago, someone put a seed right there and said, this is wrong. This has to be changed. And we slowly start to change. Right? Because someone intellectually, by developing the intellectual side, morally start to say, this is wrong. This makes no sense. We need to end there. And the seeds grows, it keeps growing, right? To this day that now we can openly talk about things. So because intellectually start to analyze the things that say this is wrong, morally, we kind of went together. And I'm not saying that we're on par intellectually and morally, because we're not, because if you think the amount of growth that we have intellectually just in the last 30 to 40 years, if we had grown morally together, this would be like by far, we had gone through all the transition phase, we'd be already a planet for regeneration, and close already to a happy planet, right? But we didn't, right? Of course, morally, we're far behind intellectually. We go so much more intellectually than morally. And it's easy to see that, right? Look at the world around, how many wars we have going right now. Some of them we don't even talking about because it's not interesting to us to talk about. But for example, Congo is in war for over a decade. Nobody talks about Congo. We don't care, right? There's so many conflicts right now going on in the world. And you can see the way we treat each other here on a daily basis, right? And I'm not saying that you have a pessimistic view of this planet, because there's also tons of good stuff going to this planet, and we are getting better. It doesn't look like, but we are getting better, and it's gonna get better and better, right? Because we're transitioning to a planet of resignation, a planet of we went blank now. Oh my gosh.
A better planet.
We've got a better planet, and not to a worse planet. We're not transitioning to like a primitive planet, right? We're going to a better planet tomorrow. So it is getting better. It doesn't look like, but it's getting better, right? And it's all through labor. Labor that helps us to grow intellectually and morally, right? So although we have so much bad things happening now in the world, we don't accept them anymore as being normal. We don't accept them anymore as being right. And then Kardec does another question to the spirits that I think it's very interesting. Because I think a lot of us have this vision, right? So he asks the spirits, why does nature itself provide for all the needs of the animals? So basically Kardec's indirectly saying, why, the animals in the nature have everything, ready to them. They don't need to work. They don't need to worry about food. They don't need to pay bills, right? Everything's provided to them in nature, right? So why he does that? So it's an indirect way to say why he does to the animals and don't do this to us, right? So that's basically what he's asking indirectly. But he asks why? Why everything's nature is ready for the animals, right? And it's a wrong concept, actually. Because a lot of us, when we're walking in the morning and going to work, and you already know that you're going to have that really bad day at work, you know what's waiting for you. And then you look at that bird flying in the air, it's like, oh, I wish I was just like that bird today, just flying free, feeling the breeze in the face, don't have to worry about work. Look at that, that's what I like. I wish I could do this the whole day today, right? And so that's what Kardec says, why everything's provided to the animals, right? And the spirits tell me very clearly, everything nature labors as you do. So Kardec, where did you get the idea that they have everything? Like, I said, when's the last time you saw a bird lying on a branch of a tree, like, and back like this, and see, oh, I don't need to do anything. In a few minutes, something is gonna fall right into my beak and I'm gonna eat. Right? Says Kardec, you're wrong. Everything labors in nature. So the only difference is, but their work is limited to self-preservation. And it's true. Because when you see the bird flying in the air, it's not just leisure time. Oh, I'm on vacation. No. So when they're born, the only moment they don't need to labor is when they're born. And then the mother is bringing, the food. As soon as they get a bit stronger, they have to labor to make their wings to be a bit stronger. And once they're strong enough for them to fly, then you're on your own. You go find food. And they have to fight for food every day. They have to fight food, they have to fight to find shelter when it's raining, they have to labor all the time, or they won't survive. They're gonna die. The food doesn't come to them. Yeah, it's available in nature, but doesn't come to them. They have to fly, they have to go. And then some of them have to migrate south when it's winter again. They migrate back, and I don't know how many kilometers they have to fly, right? So they can survive. Right? And then the next season, now they're mature birds, now they have to do a nest. Imagine, have you seen a nest? Two little branching there, two little stick, straw. It's one by one. So how many flies they have to do back and forth just to build up a little nest, right? And then the babies, then they lay the eggs. Then the babies come, and then all this mother has to fly. Has to feed like 2, 3, 4, and then has to fly. How many times? Find the food. It's not that she's going to the grocery store. She knows where the food is, and then brings it. No, she goes, finds the food, feeds one, and she has to feed herself as well. She has to survive. Because she doesn't survive, they all die. So, no labor. I come back, but you get the idea. They don't labor, right? Everything labors in nature, right? Everything labors. Great examples of labors in nature: bees and ants, constantly laboring. Everything labors. Nothing is useless in nature. Nothing. Right? Since that's the only difference, is that they labor just for survival, right? For self-preservation. And then it says, that is why labor does not lead to progress among them. And it's true, right? They just in the routine. It's not that next year they say, oh, I know next year, let's do a nest. I think next year I'm gonna do like a 2-story nest. Because I think it's cool, and then I can set up a 2 babies, I can have 4. Like, no, there's not. It's the same nest every year, the same. So there's no intellectual growth from that. It's just that, the routine, season after season, that's what it is. Okay? So that's to say, that's why labor does not lead to progress among them, while among human beings, it has a double objective: the preservation of the body and the development of the thought. The latter is also a necessity and rises them above themselves. So we labor because we need to preserve this body, but we have also to develop our thought. So we have to develop our own intellectual, which is the spirit. The body doesn't think. The body doesn't have intellectual capacities. Nothing. It's the spirit who has intellectual capacities. So everything that we develop intellectually is the spiritual laboring, learning, absorbing, and consequently improving the moral advancement. Right? And he makes very clear it's the labor is the second one, which is the thought, that makes us to rise above ourselves. That makes us to be better each time, become better people each time that we're here, by learning everything that we're doing intellectually and morally. Right? So that's very important to grow our intellectual, right? To grow our moral. But they're both important. But we have those two things that's what we labor for both, right? Being the intellectual, what makes us to progress. And then Kardec does another question to the spirits, right? Which is, it's another, I think, misconception that we have in this society we live now, and we led to think like that, right? Yes, this is question 679, are those who possess plenty of assets to ensure their welfare exempt from lawful labor? So basically, if I have a lot of money, either because I inherited the money, or I worked really hard and now I make my wealth, I'm rich, I can retire early, I'm 50 and I'm retiring, I have plenty, or because I won the lottery, does that mean that I don't need to work anymore? Because I have plenty now, I don't need anymore. I'm fine. And the answer is from physical labor, perhaps. And he didn't say from physical labor, no. We say perhaps, right? So from physical labor, maybe, right? But not from the obligation to render themselves useful according to their means and to perfect their own and others' intelligence. Okay? So just because I have a lot of money, it doesn't mean that I can live a useless life, right? A selfish life, because that's what all the advertisements for the lottery make us to think. You can watch all of them. Look at that. Winning the lottery is that you're going to buy all this bunch of stuff. You can buy a yacht, you can travel, you can this, and you can only fulfill all your desires. That's what it's about to be rich. And a lot of us have this concept that be rich, have a lot of money. That's what it is to have a life only of happiness, and I'm going to fulfill all my desires. Like a spoiled child. That's what it is, right? Because the only person that actually fulfill all the desires is a spoiled child, if there's someone spoiled them, right? So he says, no, maybe from labor, because maybe I don't need to actually have a work, which a lot of rich people do work, and they work really hard because they have to, they have to run their businesses. That's how they actually have their money, because they have businesses they have to run, they have the big companies, and that's what it is, and they work a lot, right? Sometimes work even more than what they should. They don't have time for their families. A lot of them are workaholics, right? But we never free, and the more we have, and this is in the gospel, the more will be given, the more will be asked. So the more we be given, the more we have the responsibility to help the next. You can provide more help to someone, right? As the single mother who raises 4 kids on her own and have 3 jobs, or me, who's retired at 45, well, who won the lottery, I don't need to work anymore. There's more time to actually go do a volunteer job or to, help something. And it has to go beyond donating money, but like really be involved, see what I can do with all this wealth that I have, that I can bring also the same opportunities that I had to someone else, right? Because maybe I can only donate a book, but someone who's really wealthy can donate a whole library, right? And bring education to kids, build schools, do whatever it is. So the more we have, the more we have the responsibility to help the ones around us, because the better tools and more tools they have in our hands to do, right? And remember, this is just not the material help, right? He's talking about wealth here, right? So that's what I'm talking about, wealth. Nobody needs to be wealth or rich to help anybody, right? We all have the capacity to help around. But if on top of that, I do have the material means, yes, of course. How much poverty I can mitigate out of there, right? And we do have the moral obligation to do it. Because everything that we own that's material is just temporary. It does not truly belongs to us, right? And it's given to us to help someone. But not everybody think like that. I remember one time talking with a friend of a friend, and he told me, he said, you know what, I think if God wanted me to work hard, he wouldn't have made me to be born on a rich family. So that was his concept. The concept is that God put him in a rich family, so he didn't need to work. Because if God wanted me to work, he put me in a poor family. So that's the concept that he had it, right? He didn't understand that, yes, because you're in a better position, you can help so much more. You can do so much more, right? So that's what it is. If I have, and that's how the whole universe works, actually. That's when in the gospel it talks. The law works in this way. The stronger helps the weaker. The more enlightened helps the less enlightened, right? So if I know a little bit more, I can teach the one who knows a little better. That's what a teacher does. What's a teacher? Someone who goes to school, right, study, already acquire a lot of knowledge, and now goes to school to teach the little kids, to pass the knowledge. So the one who knows more, teaches the one who knows less. The strongest protects the weaker, right? The morally evolved spirits help the less evolved spirits. Right now we have our benefactors here helping. They're more involved than us, and they protect us who know less, right? And help us. And if I know a little bit more, I can bring to someone else that may be lost and bring a little bit of comfort to this person. That's we're here to help you. So if I have more, it doesn't matter if it's morally or materially, we have to do a little bit to those who have less. That's the law. That's the law of justice, love, and charity, right? That's the word. That's why you're so connected. Right? So to think that, I have more, and it's just for myself, then it's to be selfish, and then we're missing the whole law of love and charity. Right? And remember that it's actually by promoting the growth on other people. It's by spreading this through labor, this sense of fraternity and charity that we're growing ourselves. that we are morally growing. That's how we do it. Right? So we grow by helping someone else. Just this week, I was seeing a little video from this professor in Brazil that it's a very short video, but he says, now I'm 100% sure that nothing gives you more sense of happiness and fulfills you than when you help someone. That's what he says. It's a very short video, and he says in a very emotional way, and you know, he's right. He's absolutely right, and that's what you're here for. Well, let's talk about the best part now. Let's talk about leisure and rest, right? Because work already understood, and I think we, like I said, we talk about a lot of work, and we have to work to better ourselves and everything. But let's talk about leisure, because usually don't talk about rest, right? You should not rest. You have to work all the time, right? And it's a subtitle on the chapter that's called "The Limit of Labor and Rest," right? And the first question that Kardec asks the spirit is, it's question 682. Since rest is needed after labor, isn't rest therefore a law of nature? And they say, absolutely. So even though there's no chapter called the law of rest, they say, yes, it is. It is also part of the law of nature, right? It's part of it's a part of the law of labor. It is, of course it is, absolutely. It says, rest serves to restore the strength of the body. It is also needed to give a little more freedom to the intelligence, which must rise itself above matter. So this is very interesting, because when you're talking about leisure, rest, vacation, and everything, it's very easy for us to understand our physical rest, right? When you go to sleep at night time, our bodies need to rest from all the labor of the day. But he says here that it's interesting, because this rest gives more freedom to the intelligence, which must rise itself above matter, right? So what exactly he wants to say with that? That when I rest, I'm freeing my intelligence? What exactly means about that, right? We're going to be talking about this in a little bit. But what's the limit of work? That's actually one of the questions that are like this. How much do we work? It's 40 hours a week, it's 35, it's 50, how much? And they say, you know, it's to the limit of one's strength. So there's no limit. Of course, there's a limit, and society was very good at finding a limit physically, right? To say, you know, we used to before make people work 12 hours a day, and you know, and it's like, no, this is not fair. This is not, you know, it's thinking about human rights and people's well-being and everything. And now today, kind of for the longest time, we have this 40 hours a week, and even then, now these days has been discussed a lot. You know, it's the journey, or maybe even longer days, but you work less days in a week. So we're starting to still working on it to see what, in terms of well-being for us, would be the best fit, right? Only 40 hours a week. But it seems, you know, the limit of strength is the limit of each one, right? And which also guides on what kind of a job we can do. Because maybe there's some physical jobs that I cannot do it, because I don't have the physical force to do that. But you know, some people can do it. So what kind of a job is going to do? How many hours? It's kind of up to each one. People have different abilities, and it's more like each one can decide individually what they can do, right? But then he says it's the same thing, but it's the same thing for rest. How much rest do we need? Well, science says that, average adult needs 7 to 8 hours sleep, right? Kids need about 10 to 12 hours sleep. So, you know, that's what science shows for you having a health life, health body, because, you know, that's when you sleep, that's when your hormones are regulated, blah, 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 so we all need, right? But he says that's the same thing. It's proportional to the individual's needs. Some people sleep 5 to 6 hours a night, they're totally fine. And some people like me need 7 to 8. And by the fourth day, not having my 7 to 8 hours of sleep, you better run. Don't even get close, right? So that's how it goes. It's different. And in fact, the more evolved the spirits, if you go like Chico Xavier, and of course not being unfair to all of us here, but if you go to Chico Xavier, or if you read the biography from Euripides Barçanufo, he slept 2 to 3 hours a day. And they were totally fine. But we're talking about spirits here that are vibrating so high and so connected with the high evolved spirits that that energy that they create restores all the cells in their bodies, right? Because we have to remember that most of our tiredness that we feel in our bodies, it's not from the physical work that we do, it's from the mental. Okay? That's why if you have that day of, you know, you have that day that you really work hard, like physically hard, but everything went well and as you was very productive and you did everything, and then everything very tired, but like mentally you're like super good. What you do, you fall asleep, you have your whole night of sleep. Next day wake up, you're good, right? Your body rests and you're fine. But you can have the day that you physically didn't do much, but mentally was very exhausting. You go to sleep, you wake up next morning and you're still tired. Even though you have your 7 to 8 hours of sleep, you're still tired, right? Because most of your tiredness comes from our spirit, from our state of our mind, not necessarily from how tired our bodies are, right? So Chico, Euripides just like 2, 3 hours a night, it's totally fine. It's totally fine. Because they vibrate so much higher than what we do. So to say, oh, it has to be 7 to 8 hours. Yeah, 7 to 8 hours is nice because, you know, scientifically we know we do have this material body. That's the average that we need, but it's up to each one, right? But then when we're talking about rest, and there's a book called Palavras de Vida Eterna, which is not translated yet, but will be Words of Eternal Life. He talks about the extremes that we need to be careful, right? So you have the people who are, we call the workaholics, who never have time to rest. And we know what I've seen a little bit why it's important to have the rest, not only for the body. Right? Remember he said there that the rest gives freedom to the intelligence. We're going to be talking about that. Okay. So you have the people who are workaholics, never stop, never have time for anything, never have time to think about themselves, never talking about their families, their friends, like nothing. We also have the people who are always in illness, right? Idleness, never do anything, and they always have an excuse why they cannot do something, right? So those who always have a reason why they cannot work. It could be our labor work that we do or get a job. There was an excuse why I cannot get a job. But you have the people who actually do have a job and still lead a life of complete idleness. They don't do anything. They have the routine and you know. Those are the people that Emmanuel in one of the passages from the book Living Spring says, the people who, when they discarnate exactly as they came through the doors of reincarnation. Nothing. They did anything extra, right? Beyond what was expected to be done. Right? So where it comes, let's go a little further back. Where comes this concept of rest, that we need to take a time for rest? It comes right from the Old Testament, right in Exodus. Exodus chapter 20, verse 8 says, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. So the Jewish community until this day, right from the time of Moses and today has the Saturday, right, the Sabbath, they actually keep it as holy. So that's why from the sunset on Friday until the sun's
First star.
Yeah.
The first star of Friday up to
yes, to the Saturday. They can actually not work, right? And that was when Jesus came here amongst us over 2,000 years ago. That's what he used to do. You know, they could not work. And they were so rigorous at the time that even when at the time, they even would count how many steps you could keep on a day, because if you pass that amount of steps, it would consider work. Very like you could not do anything. They had to spend the whole day just reading the scriptures. So it was a day that had to be devoted to just the spiritual, right? The program was done in a very so fanatic way, and so they got so caught up on the form, they cannot do it, cannot do this, cannot do it, they cannot work, Then Jesus, what Jesus used to do, he used to work on Saturday, so he used to kill people on Saturday, right? And he would be criticized at the time, and he did it on purpose, right? He knew there was Sabbath, right? But he did it on purpose at the time. And there's another passage from the gospel where he criticized because the apostles are picking up, they're harvesting corn to eat. And they say, the apostles, they're harvesting, they cannot work. It's the Sabbath, right? And why Jesus did it at the time? Because he wanted to tell them, listen, Yes, you guys right. It is important to have the time to connect to God, to think about the spiritual, to connect a little bit from our daily lives and have the moment of meditation. But you guys are too attached to the form and forgot that there's many ways to connect to God, right? There's just many ways to have this. Yes, it is important for us that moment I'm going to read the scriptures that we know, devote those with our prayers. It has to be a little more than that, right? And it cannot be just that. So that's what it's trying to do, right? To kind of break all that rituals, because it becomes just more a ritual than anything else, right? At the end of the time. And the connection to God can be done in many other ways. It can be through an act of charity. This can be through fraternity. To the way maybe today, instead of being worried about my work that I do that's Monday to Friday, pay my bills, maybe today I'm going to do a work that's different. I'm going to do my volunteer job. Because any act that we do, it's labor. But that's a labor of love. It's a connection to God. Every time you help someone, of course, we all should pray. We always have to the moment of prayer. Prayer is very important. But to lend a hand to someone in need, that's a prayer as well. That also connects us to God. So there's other ways to do our, and in these days, in the Christian culture, we don't even do the Saturday anymore. If you really think Sunday is actually our resting day more than Saturday, so we change on the culture, it changes the day. It doesn't really make any difference if it's the Saturday, it's the Sunday. No. I can do my time with God every day. At the end of my day, I get my 15 minutes, I grab a passage from the gospel, or I get a book and I read 5 minutes, and I spend 5 to 10 minutes trying to analyze, look through my day, what I read, how that fits in my day. I do that 15 minutes a day, that's my Sabbath. That's it. That's my day. I take my time when I break away from all my routine, and I connect to God, right? Our gospel at home, that's connecting to God. That's the moment that we stop everything and do our gospel at home. That's important. So does it have to be a specific day? No, it can be every day a little bit. Or my week is really busy, but I have a day that I know I did a volunteer job, or I do something. I'm going to spend time with my family, really time with my family, right? Really give attention to that. I didn't have time to give the whole week, right? That's labor as well. And that's very important, right? That's spiritual labor. I'm going to do my volunteer job on the weekend, right? And sometimes, yeah, sometimes we're so tired that we need that afternoon that we lie in the couch and stay there the whole afternoon watching TV, and that's fine as well. Sometimes we do need the rest as well, right? What we can do is like every weekend, that's the only thing that I do, and I don't do anything more than that, right? So if you go and actually, what is to rest, actually, right? So on Mark, if you go to the Gospel, Mark, chapter 6, verse 31, actually Jesus invited them to rest. So that's the moment when they had, Jesus had multiplied the bread. And depending who apostle you read, and which version of the Bible read, one's going to say it was 3,000 people, someone says 4,000 people, some of them say 5,000 people, right? Doesn't matter, there are thousands of people. Imagine all these people coming and going, and those apostles trying to feed everybody. So imagine the work that they're doing, right? Crazy, and people coming, going, people desperate, coming for help. And it's, the turmoil that are happening, and then Jesus tells them. So that's the passage from Mark. Then, because so many people were coming and going, that they did not even have time to have a chance to eat, he said to them, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place to get some rest." So Jesus invited them, say, "Hey, let's leave this craziness here right now. Come to me. Let's go to a quiet place. Let's rest." It's important as well. So what he was telling to them is saying exactly this. Always try to find a quiet place where can you reconnect so you can restart the work. Because that's what Jesus used to do a lot of times if you read the gospel. From time to time you go alone up to the mount to pray. And then you would come back and work, because nobody worked more and worked until this day in this planet than Jesus. Right? We had these moments as well, and that's why he's teaching them. You do have a moment. Yes, it's important to work, and the work you're doing here, it is charity, it is spiritual work, but you have to have a break. And go to a quiet place. So it removes them from there, takes them to a quiet place. The problem is that a lot of people take this passage from Jesus, say, oh, you have to go to a quiet place and to connect to God, as an excuse to do no work, right? And that's on the book, again, Words of Eternal Life, in chapter 152, it's called To Rest. So Emmanuel tells us on that passage says, however, just as those who exaggerate their own needs appear fall into precipitation, so the same way that the people that work a lot, right? We have the companions who exceed themselves in rest, finding at every step reasons to escape of the duty to be fulfilled. So yeah, we have the people who are always working, always have an excuse why I cannot stop. We also have the other people who always have an excuse why I cannot work, right? And work is there, it's there to be done, it's around us the whole time, right? It says, in the view of minimal embarrassment, so any little difficulty that they have, they declare themselves fatigued, disillusioned, depressed, or sick, and stop the machine of the service that belongs to them. So any little problem that I have, that's it. I'm sorry, I cannot help. Sorry, I cannot do this. Sorry, no, it's like any little thing. And they stop because we're all here to help each other. And then we all lose the opportunities that we have to grow morally, to understand better this law of love, charity, this law of love one another that Jesus brought to us. Right? Collecting themselves to inertia under the pretext of meditation, virtue, and prayer. No, sorry, I cannot help because now I have to pray. I'm meditating, and I'm going to meditate this whole day because I really need to center myself. And I'm not saying anything about meditation. Meditation is great. It's absolutely great. It's really a way for us to center ourselves, to reconnect, but we cannot just do that, okay? Because rest is not necessarily a way for do nothing the whole time, right? Because then we go from just working and focus on this material life to then just doing nothing, right? And none of them is good, right? In exaggeration, none of them is good, right? Because that's what he's talking here. He's talking exaggeration, going to extremes, okay? So make very clear that. Right? And they say, for this, may say that Jesus himself advised rest and prayer, forgetting that the Lord reconstituted the forces in the retreat in order to return to service and continue working. So a lot of people get this passage from the gospel and say, oh, Jesus said to rest and to go pray. So I'm going to go to a quiet prayer and I'm going to rest because so I cannot help and I cannot do anything. Right? And we all capable of helping. Right? All capable of helping doing something. Yes, there's things that we can't do these or we have something, but just say again, exaggeration. I am never ready to help anybody. I always have an excuse why I cannot work. I always have an excuse why I cannot help. That's the problem. But when Jesus called them to this resting place, because there's so this passage from the gospel is so important that Emmanuel has comments from this passage in the book, Our Daily Bread, Words of Eternal Life, Living Spring. Like there's at least 3 or 4 passages that he talks about this passage, right? And the book Living Spring, chapter 147, he talks about seek refuge in peace, and he's talking about this part as well, the Gospel of Mark, when he calls them to go, let's go to a quiet place to rest. Right? And he's talking about something that's very important. What is that quiet place? Is necessarily a place that, it's quiet, there's music going on. Yeah, it can be. He says it's obvious, and Emmanuel says in this passage, it's obvious that if you're in a place where, it's quiet, there's no noise, it is much easier for you to concentrate and do a prayer. It's obvious. But not always is possible. So if I'm a soldier there in the war, I will never be able to do my prayer. I'm there because I'm in war. So when the war ends, then I'll pray because I'm in the middle of the war. No. He's saying that it's important for us to find an internal place right? To find that quiet place in our inner sanctuary that we all have it. We all have the inner sanctuary. They help us to center ourselves. They help us to find a connection with God, right? Because not always, it's easy for us to find a quiet place to. If you can find it, of course, great. But if you can't find it, let's find a place inside of us. Because in the end, the truth is, you can be in a place quiet, have nice music going on, the incense is going on, and your mind is being like, going like completely disconnected. Going like thinking about a million things and being just on a quiet place doesn't really mean that inside I am quiet. Inside I'm ready to make that connection. Right? But at the same time, we can be in a very noisy place and just concentrate and just block everything around and be able to find the inner space, the inner quiet that now I can connect. I walk to work every day, I go back and forth, and especially in the morning, I already train myself to actually, and I work on college, so college is very busy, there's street cars and everything, it's right in town. And I train myself for the longest time now to block everything, and I can listen to the birds, because Toronto has tons of birds. You do the same, right? There's tons of birds in Toronto, tons. And a lot of people don't hear them. It's like, how can you hear? It's like, I learned how to block and hear the birds. And that's what I do, right? And that's actually when I do my morning prayer. I can listen to birds, I observe the sun. And right now there's construction on college because they're doing the bike lane. So it doesn't matter. I block everything. When the sun hits my face, like, the sun, and I thank God for the sun, especially now in the summer. It's connected. The whole noise is going on here, right? And it's great. So we can do it. So I have to find it, because not always we are going to be able to find that quiet place. And that's what Emmanuel brings in this passage. What is really the sanctuary that Jesus invited the apostles at the moment? Could be a really physical space, yes, but not necessarily. What he's telling to them is, what he's really teaching them at that moment is saying, see all those people coming back and forth, coming and going. They're only worried about their materializing, their survival. Don't be like them. Yes, you do your work, but have a moment of connection. And that's when we go back there. Remember what he said on, we need rest to give a little more freedom to the intelligence, which must arise itself above matter. Because if you don't take that time to connect to God, to get out of our routines, to understand that we are more than just work and pay bills, then our intelligence, we're never going to be free to understand that this material life is not the most important one. So we're not going to be able to rise above matter, and we're going to be attached to this life here, where this routine that we have, that's very easy to get caught up to it, right? That we're always busy, and we think they never have time to anything, and actually do. We do have time, right? But we need to now maybe relook at our priorities. And I live I work in a setting that helps me a lot to see that. How many patients I had were workaholics. And after having a really scary moment, because I work in a hospital, they completely changed their lives. Their values, what they value more, the priorities changed completely. And they still having a life, they still pay their bills, and everything, but they completely changed. Because that wake-up call, they say, wow, this could be the end, makes them to just reevaluate life. Or if we never get out of the routine, how are we going to do that? How are we going to rise above the matter? How are we going to free our intelligence, right? To understand that we need to make those changes, right? To give values where we should be giving values. Important to work, of course it's important to work again, right? We need to survive here, but we need to free our minds to go a little bit above that, right? And that's what he's saying here. So we need to find the inner place inside of us, so we can have the rest of the Spirit. And rest is, again, it's up to each one. I have people say who do spend the weekends, like work during the week, and the weekends do volunteer job. And they see that's actually what rests me, because being there is such a sense of, gratitude that I'm here, that, by the end of my weekend, I'm feeling fantastic, and I have the energy to go back to work, right? So rest doesn't necessarily that when I'm gonna sleep the whole day. Some days we do need that. Again, it's the extremes, right? Some days we do need this. Some days like, I have no energy. I need to sleep. I'm going to sleep my heart, and it's fine, right? But we need to go a little bit beyond that, because to rest is not necessarily rest the body. The spirit sometimes rests by doing something completely different. Why some of us like to go biking on the weekend, right? It's not because of the physical exercise or go to the gym. It's because mentally, it takes you out, it takes your mind off of the routine. It really, even emotionally helps us, because we need to break the routine, right? But also have to break the routine a little bit also to, help the others around us, to rest from our going and coming, to do something to someone else around us, right? And it's up to each one of us here, and that's why I hope that this lecture has helped us today, is to try to find this health balance between our physical and our spiritual work, and our spiritual labor, right? And it's very interesting, I'm talking about spiritual labor. I was watching this lecture from Arthur Valadares, which I really liked him. And he was talking about that some people work hard even inside the spiritist house. It's like 10 activities inside, especially in Brazil, that some spiritist houses are open maybe 7 days a week. So they have activities every day. They're always in the spiritist house. The whole life is like take it back, right? You have to be careful as well then. Oh, but it's inside the spiritual house. Yes, it is. Well, you need to work out there as well. It's not here. Here's the place that we learn. Yes, we do our activities, but it's out there that we practice, right? So even in a spiritual house, we need to be careful to do not make this my whole life and forget that we have a life out there, because we can be workaholics inside of the spiritual house as well. Especially in houses where they have so many activities, which is not in our case. We have very few activities, but yes, that's as well, right? So it's up to each one of us to find this balance, right? Between our necessities that we have of the physical and the material labor, but also to work on our spiritual labor. Our rest, it's up to each one of us decide how much rest each one of us has, how it's going to be this rest. There's no set recipe here, right? It's up to each one of us. As far as we have this conscious, the labor is important to do our physical and our intellectual labor, our moral labor for the spirit. And it's important to rest both of them, right? The spiritual, we rest by connecting to God, and we can connect to God in many ways, by prayer, by helping someone, by any act of charity that we can do around us. So I want to end this with a phrase from Chico Xavier that he said one time: we can take vacation from work. We should never take vacation from charity. And he's right, because no matter where we are, if we're at work, at home, or in a resort to have a vacation, we all can do acts of charity and love. Just by the way we treat people around us, when they're in the resort, how you treat the people when they're helping you to actually rest. How do you treat people, right? Charity, we can never take a vacation from. Okay? There's no rest from vacation. But yes, we can and we should take vacation from our regular work. And that's what I had to bring for you guys today. Since I don't have anybody help me today, any questions, anything on the internet or anything?
No, but I do have a few comments. First one, there is a passage of Jesus in the Bible. I won't know numbers, but they are all the apostles are in a meeting with Jesus, and they ask that Judas asked fasting, and Jesus came to them and said, well, in the last a couple of days time, etc., we fast quite a lot. We didn't have food to eat. So for us to establish a fasting period means that we are going to fast more. So we are already fasting. In other words, the way I read that, it's not necessarily has to be a specific day for you to fast, and we fast, by the way, but it's like not necessarily has to be on a Sunday or Rosh Hashanah or any particular day, right? Yom Kippur. So that's first one. Right? The second comment is about actually leisure that you just mentioned. Um, in my personal life, and that's just talking about me now, we do have the work, we do have the rest, but I have to put some pleasure on my life too. And I have been caught myself thinking about that. It's like, if I go to the other side, it's like I love sailing. So it's like, do you think that the spirits sail? It's like, I don't want to go to the other side. I want to stay here and sail. So it's like, I feel so dumb, but it's like, I I need pleasure, not only rest, right? So I'm not sure if I'm ready to the other side.
We have other things to do, right? But you're right. So for the first comment is right. And that's what Jesus brought the whole time while he was here, right? Especially to the Pharisees at the time. You guys are too caught up on the labels, right? Yes, exactly. And the truth is fasting. What's the point? One thing is for you to fast because you know what? I am going to give up my food. Like, so how many parents don't fast for their kids? They go hungry because they want to feed their kids and they don't eat sometimes for days so their kids can eat. That has value to God. But now fast for a whole time just because, and sometimes you can even harm your body, and there's a law of preservation. It's not different from self-flagellation that was done in medieval times that they thought that would purify your soul. No, you're actually destroying your body. It's actually against God's law. And then again, to me, goes in part with that angry God. Really, we need to stop to think about God as being this angry man who wants this angry being that wants me to suffer. There are things that if you do something that you suffer, I'll be pleased, right? So if you fast, if you do self-flagellation, if you suffer, that's what's going to please me, and it's not. He didn't create us for suffering. So why create suffering? With which purpose? Honestly, you create suffering, and I'm fasting now, and what that creates better? This creates a better society. This benefits to someone else out there. So what's the point? Yeah, and that's what he's trying to bring at the time. Like you guys just caught up on, it's the same thing with the Sabbath. Oh, you cannot work on the Sabbath, why?
Yeah, I think it comes from the Genesis actually, because God rests in the seventh day. So they
yes.
come on that, right?
Which is okay, which is come from Genesis, and was just to give it, but that's again, we lost the message, and we got attached to the format and lost the message. So the format's like on the seventh day we have to rest, we have not do anything. It was just an indirectly saying, hey, see, you can work, but you have to have a time to worry about your spiritual, right? So that's the rest. So it's a moment that get out of your routine, and that's what Jesus then came to clarify. What he was saying there when God rested on the seventh day, just mean, yes, you need to worry about your spiritual as well. But that doesn't mean that I have to spend a whole day doing nothing because I cannot work, right? And I can just be, and being praised, yeah, it's amazing, but it's just saying it has to go beyond that, right? But they got the format and forgot the message, right? The same goes to fasting. What's the point? Well, really, what's the benefit, right? It's different on the fasting diet. It's different from there's now the whole fasting diet, but it's different, right? But it's all done in a way that, benefits, it's different, right? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the religious fasting where what's the point? What it brings the benefits to, and that's what I think, what brings the benefits to others? So that, we need to think about that. God did not create us to suffer. Suffering is something that we choose. It does not please him. Actually, he does not want us to suffer. He wants us to love one another. He wants us to live in a world of peace, when nobody is hurt, when nobody suffers. That's his plan. The suffering is us. Suffering is our plan, not his plan, right? So that's, yeah. Any other questions, comments? Anything? No? All right. So thank you everyone that was with us over at the internet. We're hoping to see you next weekend. And let me get out, let's prepare ourselves.